Welcome to the Aligned Interior podcast, where we believe that spaces should nourish, support, and promote your mental, emotional, physical, and your spiritual well-being, while also being true reflections of your most authentic self. Here we explore how the spaces we dwell in make us well and unwell, while also giving you the knowledge and the tools on how to bring you and your space into alignment, gleaning insights from acclaimed experts on the cutting edge of science and senses. I am your host, Sonia Randall, holistic interior designer and owner of the Aligned Interior. Thank you so much for being here. Let's dive in. Hi there. Welcome to this week's episode where we are going to be chatting all things gemstones and interior design, health, and well-being. This week's episode is going to appeal most to our spiritual listeners. However, we encourage everyone to take a listen with an open mind, open heart, and just take what resonates and leave what doesn't. Our special guest today is Tiffany April Raines. She is a Vedic gemologist, the CEO and co-founder of Astrological Gem Stones. She has become one of the world's most sought after Vedic gemologists, and I'm super excited to chat with her today. So let's dive right in. Well, hi, Tiffany, and thank you for being on the podcast today. I'm excited to talk to you about all things gemstone and interior design. So thank you.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
So I noticed that you have a unique backstory. What would you say to someone in terms of how you've gotten into gemology and your journey around that from a skeptic to now a globally recognized Vedic gemologist?
That's a great question. I think one of the most important things for any of us on any type of spiritual or even really personal journey is to do our best to stay in alignment to the best of our ability with what we believe that truth is, or what type of truth resonates for us in terms of our path of growth and illumination and joy and interest. So, yeah, as you mentioned, I was initially quite a skeptic when it came to what I do. I work with precious gemstones as an astrological remedial measure. Some people might not be familiar with Vedic astrology, it's an ancient Indian form of astrology. And I work with gemstones that effectively channel the influence of the planets in our solar system to help remediate or activate certain planets in the wearer's astrological chart. So, yes, it made absolutely no sense to me when I first started, but I've always had a background and an interest in gems and crystals. So, being open, because I like to resonate with the work that I do, I began studying the effects that these gemstones were having people in terms of their ability to change lives, improve lives, help people align with their greatest calling, experience really profound awakening, and sure enough, determined that it really does work. And if somebody is not wearing the right gemstone for themselves, it can really throw them out of alignment, which to me is further evidence that it's not just a placebo effect. We really do have to make sure that people are wearing the right gemstones in order to get the results that they desire. So it's definitely a fascinating one. And over the years, staying in alignment with truth and being open to being on a path of accuracy and integrity within this field, even my own methods of gemstone prescription, how I read astrological charts, how I prescribe the gemstones, has evolved to make sure that I am in service to the greater good and am able to transmit this knowledge with as much objective clarity as I possibly can.
So that's fascinating. As you were talking about your journey, I know that you had conducted kind of your own research and you've kind of tested things out with gemstones.
Mhm.
Do you have one, memory that comes to mind as most significant for you of a gemstone that you kind of did a trial and error with to see its effects on you?
Yeah,
that you wouldn't mind
Absolutely.
sharing, of course.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. There's been some interesting ones. And the interesting thing about what we do and working with the astrological charts and the planets and all of this, it's almost a way of reading into our karmic potential or karmic outcome. So when we wear a certain gemstone to amplify a certain karmic or energetic frequency, it's really fascinating how that can pan out. So, and it's not necessarily always straightforward, good or bad either. Sometimes there's mixed results. You can amplify a bunch of different things where it just gets complicated and there's just more work to do. So we try to keep things simple whenever possible. I think most people desire more simplicity in their lives and balance. But to give you some examples, I have tested pretty much every possible astrological gemstone on myself. And the ones that are good for me, and I am covered in them. I've got all of my Vedic gems wherever I've got room for them. So I do test everything that I own as well to make sure that there really was suitability there. And when it's a stone that is right for me, there's often just a sudden increase in synchronicity in things that cannot be explained by sheer coincidence, things that defy the odds, that show that support is in my favor. My primary gemstone, which is a yellow sapphire for the planet Jupiter, as soon as I started wearing them, incredible things clicked into place for me around karma related to my house, my home, land, partnerships, family, all these different things that for me, Jupiter signifies in my chart. And I've tried gems that amplify houses that are not necessarily good for me. And there have been, instant accidents, obstacles, adversity, complications, and they're not like random complications. You could really tie them very specifically to the associated planets beyond a shadow of a doubt. So sometimes I think that my results might be particularly obvious because somewhere cosmically, I am kind of the record keeper of this type of knowledge. So it's become apparent. But over the years, we've had other people test really powerful gems and come to the same conclusions. It's just irrefutable when it's the right gem and when it's the wrong gem. So that can relate to totally unexpected and complicated drama, confusion, arguments, disasters, accidents. Generally speaking, people are not going to be harmed physically. We don't really have to worry about car accidents. I have experienced near car accidents when messing around with Saturn, which I'm really not supposed to do with blue sapphires. One time, the entire underside of my car was taken out after testing a Saturn gem within 5 minutes of getting in the car. I was fine, but to this day, the underside of my car is still kind of zip tied in place.
Is
Things like that, that otherwise would never have happened. I don't normally lose the underside of my car. In fact, I've never had
Yeah.
any issues with my vehicles except for testing gems that directly have impacted my vehicle karma. So it's definitely fascinating how this stuff does work.
So if you were working with Saturn in your chart, like you wanted to see if you could increase it in a positive way, a benefic way, did you choose your blue sapphire stone based on the house that it was in, or like would that be different for different people? I guess I want to preface that.
Yes. Great questions. Yes. Saturn is going to represent different houses in the astrological chart for different people. It's going to be placed in different houses and different signs for different people. For me, I have a weak and afflicted Saturn, and I could always use help with structure and discipline, sticking to things, a little more coherence. I tend to be just kind of all over the place with my creativity. Saturn in my chart is placed in the 12th house of loss and expenditure, and it directly aspects Jupiter, which for me is debilitated in Saturn's sign, and Jupiter rules over vehicles and home life. So there's been a direct hit to those things when I activate Saturn. And when I activate Jupiter, which is a really friendly planet for me, it's the opposite. It's incredibly supportive and offsets that Saturn effect. And even though I knew technically I shouldn't really mess with Saturn for my chart, I also want to believe that the planets don't have this type of omnipotent dominion over us. And surely we can work with anything to our benefit. But then I've just learned that with the malefic planets, we can still learn from that, but it just makes things so much harder. I want to learn my lessons in the most supportive and easy way possible.
Right.
I don't really want to bring on any more suffering and expenditure and exhaustion in order to grow than I really have to.
No, that makes sense. And thank you for sharing. As you were saying that, it was just making me think that doing a trial and error to kind of get an understanding energetically of how it's working is kind of important. So,
I think it's so important. And we
yeah,
offer that to our clients. Anybody who
right.
is looking to make this investment in an astrological gem, we welcome them to try it out for a few days to make sure that there's resonance. Most people don't have the underside of their car stripped out from under them as they're driving.
Right.
So I don't want to make anybody afraid. But also, part of my job and something I take very seriously is checking people's charts and making sure that we're strengthening the most supportive planets possible so that people will get the most auspicious results as possible as quickly as possible. I'm kind of here as a safety buffer for people, so we make sure people aren't going out the door with things that are not going to be optimal for them.
That makes sense. And so, what made you choose the Vedic route in astrology rather than Western? And is there a difference between those when it comes to gemology?
Yeah. There are some really key differences between Western and Vedic, primarily their methods of calculation. So, people that are used to Western astrology will see a lot of the similarities in terms of the planets and the signs and the relationship to the wheel of the zodiac. Vedic astrology has a different system of calculation that always accurately reflects the position of the stars overhead in the sky. It's dynamic and flexible and remains accurate forever due to the precession of the equinox, the fact that the Earth is not spinning on a perfect axis, over the years, Western astrology has become a little bit less accurate year by year. And over the course of 2,000 years, when you look up at the sky, Jupiter is no longer positioned in the constellation of Capricorn. It's now in
Right.
Aquarius, and Vedic astrology will always hold that dynamism and always be accurate. Similarly, with the gemstones, we find that there's just more accuracy there. If you're trying to use a system like Western astrology, that unfortunately, in many ways, the truth is still there, but it's become a little bit not as rooted in the reality of the sky. The gemstones do not work in the same way. So that's kind of why I lean towards Vedic. I just find it to be consistently more accurate. And I like my spiritual knowledge to be referenced accurately in the world around me, if that makes sense. It's just part of my values, I guess.
Definitely. I was practicing Western astrology and I was going to a Vedic astrologer like all the time for general guidance and charts. And I started asking myself, why am I doing Western if I'll only go to a Vedic astrologer? This doesn't make any sense. And so then, yeah, I asked him to kind of take me under his wing and I haven't looked back. But thank you for clarifying that to the audience because I think it's important to let people know why one chooses one route as for another. And I like the fact that you said accuracy and you're not taking away from the fact that there are lots of benefits from Western astrology, but it really just depends on what you're looking for.
It does, and one's own relationship to truth. What I love is that there are so many different paths that lead to truth when that's what the seeker is seeking.
Mhm.
So, Western astrology, I think, in a lot of cases, can be used as a divination tool. And I don't want to say that there isn't accuracy within it as a closed system. So, anytime that anybody is able to obtain a route of growth and greater self awareness through any of these systems, human design, any of them, I think it's to that benefit. It's just a matter of checking in with oneself to make sure A, is this resonant? And B, is this leading towards my growth? I think a lot of people with Western or Vedic will sometimes get in a rut where they're like, oh, don't mind me. I'm such a Pisces. And then don't actually pursue growth. So I think the best use of any of these tools is to make sure that we are looking at what we need to look at and getting the support we need to be the best possible version of ourselves, even when it's really uncomfortable to commit to that. It's still really important.
Definitely. And I like that you bring that up just, with the Pisces reference or any, what I'm going to say next is applicable for any sign, but there's high frequency and lower frequency expressions. And it is about self growth and soul growth at the end of the day. So in terms of just gemstones in general, how would you say to someone that how gemstones would play in their lives? Like, how does gemstones play, whether they purchase gemstones or not? If you were to talk to someone who, I don't know, was a skeptic or not, how does it impact their body's energetic field, all of that?
Yep, it's a great question. I do think that they impact our energetic field first and foremost. And that's one of those things that can be somewhat hard to quantify. We did rent out an aura camera in a shop in Sedona, Arizona one day, and had a blind tester and blindfolded put different gems on them, and we're taking pictures of their electromagnetic fields to see how the different stones affected them. So I am truly interested in figuring out ways that we can map this verifiably and predictably
Mm.
so that it's not just a pseudoscience, although it will probably always be under that category. So if somebody feels resistance to this, it's totally fine. But we do find a lot of people intuitively or instinctively are drawn to it. It's hitting their truth sensors in a really awesome way. So yes, the gems are going to affect the energy field first in terms of alignment. And what we noticed when we did this aura cam experiment or looked at the electromagnetic imprints of people testing different gems is that the ones that were not good for them, it wasn't as cut and dry as the ones that weren't good for them dulled their aura. And the ones that were good for them made them sparkly and rainbows. It was more that we saw balance and symmetry and coherence around them and more kind of chaos or muddled colors or things that just looked complicated around them when it wasn't right for them. So it was moving things either way, but to move things in a direction of coherence and alignment is ultimately our goal. And when the energy field in our physiology is in a state of alignment and coherence, the world around us begins to click into place a little bit more. The decisions that we make tend to be in our best interest and the best interest of people around us. It becomes easier to look at ourselves and our patterns and make changes where we need to be in alignment. When we're out of alignment and in chaos, it's easier to sleepwalk, so to speak, or be out of alignment or be in a state of defensiveness or attached to things that really aren't serving us anymore. So the gemstones first and foremost set us up in an energetic direction of success, and the karmic or the planetary influences that can come through when we're in that state of alignment become incredibly profound. And that's where you can dial it in. Every planet represents different areas of life and humanity, as do the different houses in the astrological chart. So, if somebody, for example, was having a lack of alignment in their relationships, there's different ways we can look at that. The seventh house in astrology has to do with relationships and partnerships. Venus is the planet of love and harmony in marriage. So those are some just kind of initial places that we can look and activate certain karmic placements in the astrological chart with gemstones. So a Venus gemstone would be a diamond. If somebody just needed more enjoyment and fun in their relationships, things were getting too serious and disconnected, they could try strengthening Venus to kind of open that channel again. But sometimes I will get a call, somebody will be like, my husband is totally shut down, disconnected, what have you. What gem can I wear to make him XYZ? And that's not how it works. We can wear a gem on ourselves to align us with ultimate potential in partnership, but it still requires the conscious participation of our partner. So, they can wear gems, they can do the work, but both people in that particular situation have to be open to doing the work. And same thing with like a career example. If somebody wanted to strengthen their 10th house, which is the house of career success, they can wear a gem, but if they're in a career or a career path that's out of alignment for them, they can radiate optimal professionalism and knowledge and bring in whatever they want, but they can't necessarily fully change their job environment. So sometimes, well, they do have to change their job environment. They have to go towards something that is more supportive for them. So basically, if we are out of alignment, we're wearing the gems, we're doing the work, and there's things that are still discordant, it becomes painfully obvious. And we have to choose to jump ship from what wasn't working with our gems, with our alignment, and have the faith that this incredible thing is around the corner for us, which it often is. And that's why I always tell my customers, especially the ones that are at these really big life junction points, to get back to me in a year or two, because often you can really see the success stories that when they've done the work, they've aligned, they've made the shifts, they've got these karmic beacons of light helping them. It's just amazing what we see on the other side when people commit to that ultimate path for themselves.
I love that you're highlighting this. So, this podcast is basically about how people can use space to facilitate better health and well being. And what you're describing to me about gemstones is just that. It is literally a tool that you can use that has benefic impacts on your energetic field. But it's not a miracle drug. it doesn't just solve all of your issues. You have, but what I love about it, I think what I'm hearing you say is that it's helping set you up for success. It's helping to give you the best energy, the best atmosphere to be able to grow and to reach your potential.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yep. Aligning us with our best possible outcome. We still have to do the work to get there, though, unfortunately.
exactly. No, for sure. But I love that it's a healing supportive tool that people can use as they continue on their journey. We're talked about some of the benefits of using different gemstones for your energetic field. If you used an incorrect gemstone, or one that isn't working with your astrological energy, what what could be some effects there? Like, are there certain gemstones that are just unsafe for you, or will have detrimental effects?
Yeah. Yes, there are some that are truly unsafe. And ethically, I will absolutely refuse to ever sell a gemstone that I feel is unsafe for somebody. But the planets do have these different qualities that aren't necessarily resonant with everybody. So we can look at Mars, for example. Mars is the planet of war and overcoming battles. And some people really need that push in assertiveness and inner fire to get them through. People that are incredibly passive or internalize too much or are super reclusive and don't have the courage to speak up or take action. They can really benefit from strengthening Mars in a lot of cases. But then you have other people that may have so much fire in their physiology already. Maybe they're already experiencing conflict and they think to themselves, I want to strengthen Mars even more with an astrological red coral to win these battles that I'm fighting, but really increasing that war energy will totally throw them out of alignment. Perhaps really they needed to dial it back in and stop attacking everything in the outer world and look more inward and focus on peace. So it wouldn't make sense to necessarily add fuel to the fire. Whereas for a person like that, maybe wearing a pearl for the moon, which is calming and cooling and soothing and offers one the ability to gain tremendous emotional insight in the direction of growth and maturity, would be way more appropriate for them. So that's where it gets kind of interesting when it comes to prescription, is that sometimes what we think we want or need can't really come from an external source. We have to almost do the opposite of something that we are prone to find balance. So balance is just one of those incredibly operative words for what we do. When we're in a state of balance, that's really when we're the most equipped to do the work that we need to do. So, in the case of something like Mars, the side effect would be anger, hostility, conflict, aggression, burnout, too much inner fire. And too much inner fire can lead to inflammatory responses in the body and health problems. So we can kind of track it that way as well. Fortunately, most people, if they put on a stone that doesn't work for them, know it really right away. And that's again why we offer this testing service. People can hang out with it. You don't even have it set into jewelry yet. Just having it around you, our energetic field expands pretty far outside of our bodies. So having the gem in a pocket or a wallet or a glove compartment or a center console or on a bedside table often still produces a lot of the effects during a trial period to let people know if they're essentially liking who they are while they're testing the gem.
That seems very helpful. And I'm thinking about what you were saying about looking at that person's overall chart. And I know that that's an in-depth process. But if someone were to come to you to sign up for a consultation, what are some just overarching, like the major things that you look at? Is it the sun, moon, rising? Are there key attributes that you typically kind of go to first?
Yeah. Definitely. So, and I do offer written gemstone consultations, and I do them in writing because this is often such new information for people, especially those coming from the Western astrology sphere coming over to Vedic, that I think it's really helpful to have it in writing. A lot of people will continue to come back to that consultation and reread it as their knowledge develops and it becomes kind of more and more relevant for them as they go. But I will explain, the Vedic sun, moon, rising. And I always kind of mention the contrast between Vedic and Western just so people have a handle on both. And I always talk about the planetary periods that people are in. They're called mahadashas, and they're planetary periods that are kind of like chapters of a book or eras. The planet creates this overlying theme of influence for the duration of the Mahadasha. So if somebody is in a Saturn period, they're probably going to be doing a lot more hard work than they might be used to. If they're in a Mercury period, there might be a lot of travel and focus on business and commerce. So I always talk about what periods people are in, just to kind of give them a clue of what some of the planetary influences are that they're going through. And then I recommend the gemstones. The classic and generally speaking safest way to recommend gems is to strengthen the rulers of the first, fifth, and ninth houses. Those are called
Mhm.
the trine houses, and they are traditionally the most auspicious or the
Yes.
most helpful. But we can't just blanket prescribe them because there's more context than that. Sometimes the ruler of the most auspicious fifth house also rules the sixth house of conflict, obstacles, delays, disasters, and accidents. And if that is
Right.
actually taking more precedence, we have to look at that. If a planet is a functional benefic, like Jupiter, that always wants to be friendly, or a functional malefic, like Saturn, that tends to be much more of a tough love type teacher, even if they rule over an auspicious, friendly, supportive house, the flavor and the nature of that planet will still come through, and the placement of that planet will come through. Somebody might have the ruler of a really favorable house. The fifth house is good luck, good karma. But if
Mhm.
that the ruler of that planet is positioned in a challenging place in the chart, the gemstones aren't just going to make that karmic placement go away. They will activate that placement to give somebody the tools and resources they need to essentially karmically neutralize that placement so they don't have to continue blindly suffering, hitting their head on the wall over and over again, trying to overcome that challenging karma. So it's a way to move through it to neutralize it. I love the idea of neutralizing challenging karma. So it kind of just becomes nothing. It doesn't become something that's sticking on us anymore. And then when that's neutralized, it makes it so much easier and faster to be on our path of growth and really see wealth and success and fulfillment of our desires.
Interesting. And so if someone were to not do a consultation and say if they were just, they're just dabbling into gemstones, what would be kind of your, the basic advice that you would give of like, look at this. I mean, realize it's super nuanced, like you said, and you do need to come at it with a level of care. But if you're someone that's just like, you know what, I'm just dabbling around, I'd like to probably pick a stone that's relatively safe choice.
Mhm.
What area of their chart would you have them look at?
Why I focus on the most auspicious planets, so
Mhm.
planets that rule over auspicious chart houses and are well placed in the chart, so
Okay.
that we're strengthening more of the strengths they already have. So if a person has a really auspicious ninth house ruler, ninth house is dharma, highest calling, and it's placed in a really healthy house for them, chances are that they've already got a lot of blessings in this lifetime. But what we'll do is just activate more of those blessings. Everybody can handle more blessings. So, that's just a really easy way of going about it. And maybe those types of blessings would be more money, more wealth, more general success, more recognition in the work that's being done. Maybe somebody's already professionally successful, but they want to reach some level of fame or recognition for their work, so they can strengthen a planet that's already strong with minimal side effects. Another way to dose it, so to speak, is to wear a secondary gem. So like sapphire and diamond and ruby and emerald are the primary gems. They're also a considerable investment, and when they're the right quality to be effective for these purposes, they're incredibly rare, and they can cost upwards of tens of thousands of dollars, and they can also be incredibly medicinal and incredibly potent. So we can dial all of that down and keep it simple with the secondary gems like citrine or amethyst or peridot that cost a heck of a lot less money, and they will still help people move in the direction of alignment, but it's just less intense. And so a lot of people do start with their secondary gems for $1,000 or less, strengthen the good easy planets in their chart, notice that they really enjoy this, and then start dabbling in the more intense stuff. Maybe when they start, they start seeing movement, they start seeing new avenues of success, and then they also start seeing where in that direction of success they're really stuck and running into patterns. And that's when we get deeper and deeper. So it's almost like a form of therapy in a way, where you can take it as deep as you want to take it. We try to meet people wherever they're at.
That makes sense. And in terms of, so if they were doing an application, I know that you guys focus a lot on jewelry and wearing the gemstones. Can you speak to the benefits of, wearing it versus, having a gemstone placed in your home somewhere?
Hmm.
Like, is there a difference between having it physically on your body or having it placed in a specific area that could help enhance the energy?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's something called Vastu or Stipachevade,
Mhm.
which is a similar sister science that has to do with it's almost like the Vedic feng shui. It's like
Mhm.
design of houses to maximize flow. The building that I'm in right now is Vastu, so it's completely aligned as much as possible with like cosmic forces. And this is a wonderful building. It's very supportive. And part of Vastu is actually burying the 9 astrological gemstones somewhere in the foundation of the house or the building. So I'm sure that there's gems buried somewhere around here. So that can create support. And I'm sure this probably ties into your primary field of interest, which is maximizing support, coherence, and light, so to speak, in a person's space. So when we have astrological gemstones on our body or near our energetic fields, they are working on us very specifically. If they're too far away from us, maybe they have some ability to radiate blessings within a space, but they're no longer going to be working on the astrological or the karmic impact of the gemstone owner. They might be doing something to the space itself. There's a direct tie there. In fact, you can wear a gemstone that corresponds to the fourth house, which is the house of home, which is kind of an interesting way of going about it as well. But this does also speak to crystals and positioning of crystals in a space. I have loads of crystals all around me all the time. I've got my salt lamps and my selenites and other things that I keep in my space, pyrite to keep me grounded. So the crystal world is a whole other world. And both my office here and my home are covered in very intentionally placed crystals. I have like a little secret black obsidian that I keep just to absorb any kind of negative energy that comes
Mhm.
through. This is a technically volcanic glass, but it's incredibly absorbent for things that are just negative or dulling that, I don't want to internalize. I just ask this thing to kind of suck it up and neutralize it for me. So that just stays back here. So the astrological gems, kind of to answer your question, should be on the wearer to work on the wearer's energetic field and their astrological karma. But it's totally fine and acceptable to have gems and crystals in one space too, to amplify the space, to move energy in certain ways, to absorb energy in certain ways, to reflect energy in certain ways. And then I've also got statues of some of the Hindu deities that I really relate to, and I offer gemstones at the feet of them. So, in other words, if there's something that feels just too big for me to handle, I will take a gemstone for a planet. Maybe it's not something I should wear, or it's a gem that I'm retiring, and I put it at the feet of this statue. I got Ganesh back here. He's a major supporter. And if there's something that's just too big for me, I just lay it at his feet and let him take care of it. So, there's a lot of buzz going on behind me here with the gems, with crystals. And then sacred geometry is a really big one too. You'll see the Sri Yantra. I've got a couple different places here, which is considered kind of one of the most auspicious and powerful symbols in the entire universe. And that helps with harmony and coherence. So there's ways to kind of play with and move energy in that way as well.
I love that. And so what I'm hearing from you is wearing the gemstones kind of works on your energetic field and your astrological makeup and karma directly. It's like an ongoing process of basically being part. The way I'm hearing it is it's kind of like you're wearing it now, it's part of your energetic field in a way.
It's like part of you. Mhm.
Yes. And amplifying those like as you were just saying, because if you're going through your houses or ruling planets, you have that energy in your body or in your energetic field. So you're literally just amplifying what's already there.
Yes. Yes. Amplifying, aligning, working with. Yeah, exactly.
And then in terms of the space, I love that you have the obsidian. Is
Mhm.
there any other gemstones that you subscribe to in your space, like one that just generally purifies, or any other gemstones that are kind of your go to for spaces?
Yeah, for spaces, definitely. Selenite is a
Mhm.
great one. Selenite's a major purifier. I have several Himalayan salt lamps that I really like. When you're looking to clear the energy out of a gemstone or a piece of jewelry that you wear, you can soak it in salt water. But there are some things like pearl or coral that you don't want to soak for too long because they're porous. You can place them, or any other crystal or gem that is feeling heavy, like it's absorbed a lot of energy,
Mhm.
on a selenite or a Himalayan salt lamp, and they just have purifying. They can purify anything that really that sits on them or has extended contact with them. So I absolutely do love those. Let me see if I can. I don't know if you can see it here. This is one of my
Yeah,
giant amethysts.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So this guy here, I got him at the Denver Gem Show back in September. Just having this behind me while I work is just keeping me so grounded. I think there's something about our chakras and our energy that they're affected behind us as well.
Mhm.
So having that big guy is great. I guess I'll just give you a tour while we're at it. So here's my here's
I
my
think this
desk.
is very helpful for people.
Yeah, just if anybody was curious. So I've got like my Lakshmi and my Ganesh. Lakshmi rolls over gems. Ganesh is just super supportive. I really love pyrite for the grounding qualities. It's doing this type of work. It's like getting back into grounding is just critical for me all the time. Um, and then over here, I think you can see that. This is celestite. This is a great one for the home. Celestite really has an angelic quality about it that I really, really appreciate. This is citrine. Citrine is great for radiating warmth in a space. This is an aquamarine specimen that I've got on my celestite here. This helps me just kind of channel higher knowledge and communicate it in a clear way to other people. Lapis is another one really good for grounding and structure. Lapis is kind of like a Saturn gem, but it's not really dangerous. So having it over here, I can get that structure I need from Saturn without, wrecking my car, so to speak. Uh, so labradorite is great for channeling kind of outer worldly influences. Um, and this is a 3D Sri Yantra. This would be a great one for somebody's space.
Mm.
So you've got the 2D Sri Yantra over here, and the 3D, which just has a way of just resonating or amplifying more coherence in a space. So yeah, those are some of my favorites. Apophyllite is a really cool one. This one also has to do with dialing into kind of angelic realms and higher realms. So I have apophyllite all over my home. It just really keeps things on a very high, clear frequency. So yeah, and you can see my Ganesh and some of
I
his
love this.
gemstone offerings also on a. So this is a selenite Sri Yantra. So that is a super turbocharged clear. Like this thing's just sitting here magnifying stuff, and Ganesh was helping me get it done. So hopefully, hopefully that was a useful tour for you.
No, that was very helpful.
Good.
So I'm assuming based on kind of your tour that there's no harmful effects of using a lot of different types of crystals within the same space in the same proximity.
Depends on one's tolerance for intensity. I do
Okay.
have people come in my office and say it's almost too much for them in here, but I am an
Mhm.
inherently intense person. And, even though all of these gems have kind of different blasts of frequency, I have really intentionally placed them, which also may get into your field of interest, is the placement of this type of stuff. And I can tell when certain gems don't want to work together. There's something discordant, but that's entirely something that I pick up on physiologically. Perhaps there's some book or knowledge or resource out there for what gems you can combine in a space to get maximum harmonic output from them. But to me, I think the more that one dials in and trusts and exercises self referral on this stuff, one can say these two things, almost like flavors in cooking, just don't go together
Mhm.
well. These two other things are working with each other to create really wonderful symbiotic combinations. So using one's intuition is always, I think, the best. And also reading the space. If you have these crystals in different places and walk in after being gone all day and just kind of like move them around, give them space. The closer proximity different crystals are in a person's space, the more they're going to interact. If you give them,
Right.
6 feet apart, their own independent energy fields are going to behave totally differently. So, spacing, location, putting certain crystals in corners is going to have really a different effect than having them in the middle of a room. Proximity to you and your energy field when you're working. I like having my amethyst, it's got my back. Other
Right.
things, I want them around my brain. So, yeah, feel it out and trust your gut. There's really no right or wrong with this stuff. The proof is in how one feels, operates, and, one's own energetic response to what one is doing. That'll tell you everything.
And that makes sense. And, what I'm hearing is that, like also think about how you operate through your space. So, like what you're saying is, I'm sitting in my office chair and I'm looking for support in a certain area. So I chose amethyst to be behind me. So thinking about how you work and reflecting on what would you'd like help and support with. And that could vary upon just you individually, or if you're in a space with other people, it could be to help, facilitate harmony within
Yes.
relationships,
Yes.
enhancing romantic energy, in those spaces, all of it.
All of
So,
it.
and then,
Totally. Hmm.
yeah,
Go ahead.
I love that. And then just kind of testing it out and seeing and just making adjustments, just like you do with everything in life.
Exactly, exactly. Just keep tweaking it and fine tuning it. And then sometimes something will work really great for a while, but then there's an adjustment that's needed because something else is going on. Some new energy or project has entered the space, and totally okay to rearrange it again. And then I've noticed, I think we have matching like split leaf philodendrons here in Munsters.
Yes.
The plants are such a big part of it too. And one of the kind of fun things about plants and crystals is I think that they go so incredibly well together in a space. I will tell you, I have really messed up a lot of crystals in my day putting them in my plants because they're such a wonderful combination. But a lot of minerals cannot be put inside of a plant. So for anybody listening who's like, ooh, gems and plants, basically, if the mineral ends in ite, like selenite or celestite, apophyllite, it cannot handle excessive moisture and it will disintegrate. So have something like a quartz, like amethyst or citrine, can go inside of a plant, and you're not going to mess it up. So there's a little bit of a learning curve there as well. But I've even done experiments where I have tried different crystals inside of plants that are sick to see if I can help to heal them. And
Mm.
the jury's still out on that a little bit because, for example, the moisture retains in the soil more if you have a whole bunch of crystals, And so like there's
Right.
different like how do you anyway, I do want to keep playing with this, but quartz is a great one for space because, especially somebody new to working with crystals or having crystals in their home or their office, because quartz is programmable. It's a completely blank canvas. So, if somebody really has a specific intention, but they don't know or trust themselves enough to work with a particular stone to activate that, start with quartz and work with it, communicate with it, and it will amplify whatever it's basically told to amplify. So that would be a great beginner stone for somebody's space.
I love that. And let's speak to that. How do you program a stone? Like when you get a stone, what is kind of the process for you? Because I know you mentioned even you put one by Ganesh. And do you have a ceremony? Is there a ritual around bringing gemstones into your space and wearing them?
It is a an established relationship. So, as funny as this sounds, I've gotten to the point with my gems and my crystals where I'm able to effectively communicate with them, get an idea of where they're at, what they want to participate in, and I'm able to somehow communicate on a level with them that they understand the jobs that I would like them to do. So, I also work with the gems that I sell my clients. We have a whole activation station or charging station in our office before we ship the stones to help customers who don't feel quite confident imprinting their intentions in a gem will have me do it for them. And I'm happy to do it. I've gotten very good at stepping outside of my own bias. I never imprint somebody else's gemstone with what I think they need. I get consent from the future wearer and ask them to tell me what their intentions are. And I'm glad to just kind of infuse it before I ship it out. So it's almost an instantaneous thing. And when it comes to even the quartz in my life, I have found that different quartz crystals lean towards different things. So I have one that is specifically for clarity. I have one that's specifically for interpersonal harmony. And when I work with them and ask them, it's like they it was already somewhere in their destiny or their desire to have these jobs. And so when I
Mm.
confirmed it with them, I said, all right, you are my new clarity crystal. It was just like it was just so obvious that that's what it wanted to do. So I
Right.
think that gems have an interesting path of destiny, very similar to humans, and that they really do want these kind of high level jobs to do. So, but if somebody's new and doesn't really know, there are different ceremonies, just using it in meditation, fake it till you make it. Just keep holding the crystal and having thoughts about whatever, visualize it, or however people do things when it comes to manifestation. Just hold the crystal while you do that. And it's okay if it doesn't feel like much in the beginning. The more one practices, the more one is able to kind of impart conscious intention into the mineral world in a metaphysical way. But it's like sending a signal through photons or electrons or thoughts or synapses or whatever happens. Just kind of shoot it over. Send an email of intention into a crystal. See if it works for you.
That makes sense. You were reminding me I had spoken with someone who worked with plants a lot. And they said to me that they felt that the plants choose you just as much as you choose them. And so when you were describing that, I was thinking, oh, maybe is she also speaking to, like you may purchase the gemstone, but you're both involved in that process, maybe.
It's so interesting, and it's exactly that. There are some gemstones that make it so obvious that they want to go home with somebody that I'm talking to. And there's gemstones that have a huge amount of resistance and don't want to go to somebody. And they make that clear too. And I will be honest about it. And what's really wonderful is that almost always customers feel the same way. Sometimes they need a little bit of validation in what they're feeling. And I'll be like, I'm just not feeling this one. And sometimes be like, oh, I'm so glad you said that because I was feeling kind of funny about that. Or I'll be like, I feel like this gem really wants to go home with you. And they'd be like, I felt insane, but my heart is just bursting for this stone. And I'm like, don't even, sometimes we have to get out of our heads with this stuff because the more we try to make it make sense rationally, sometimes the more kind of crazy it becomes. It's almost like a heart science in a certain way. But yes, and you're absolutely right. Plants choose people too. It's the same thing. I actually have a plant nursery on the side. That's my other love. I have a little permaculture farm and nursery, and the plants volunteer to go with people when I'm fulfilling a plant order in the exact same way that the gems do. They just know. And again, I think it goes back to Course of Destiny. We're just meant to be with certain people, although a plant's lifespan is a heck of a lot shorter than a person's. Everybody has an ultimate path of happiness. And sometimes my job is just to do my best to facilitate that connection.
I like how you're referring to it like people, because I think people get that when they meet someone, like everybody knows, you meet some people and you're like, oh my God, I've known you forever. Like I just want to keep talking to you. They call it chemistry or whatever it is. But the point is you are communicating on an energetic level that, I mean, science supports it in some ways, but there's a lot of holes around like why that is that way. And it's basically like that with everything else in your life. You have some guidance and intuition around what, is good for your home, or choosing each other, in that way. So that's very interesting. So when buying gemstones, speaking of that, what advice do you typically give people to look for? If they're obviously you're kind of navigating that for them through your company, through Astrological Gem Stones, which I'd like to speak about before we go. Um, but do you have any just general things that you like people to keep in mind as they navigate that purchasing buyer's world?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you brought this up because it's so
Yeah.
critically important that the quality of the gemstone is everything when it comes to it having astrological power. So, a vast majority of sapphires on the commercial market are heat treated, and they're heated to I think around like 16 or 1700 degrees Fahrenheit, almost to their melting point to purify out any cloudiness to enhance their color. But this does effectively kill the spirit of the gem. It's not the same gem after treatment. So it's so important to make sure that the gems are natural and untreated, and they need to have as few flaws and inclusions as possible, because when you have all these cracks or little black spots or fissures or whatever inclusions inside of the gemstone, that prohibits energy and light from transmitting through the gemstone effectively. It blocks it, it distorts it. So it has to be as flawless as possible, untreated. It needs to have as much color saturation as possible, and it needs to be over a certain size. It doesn't have to be huge, but most gems should be a minimum of 2 carats or so, to have enough heft to really produce effect. So there is quality criteria that has to be followed. And when you're working with a qualified Vedic gemologist that also sells gemstones, everything that they offer is already going to be screened for this stuff. So
Right.
that's what's really nice. That's the importance of getting an astrological gemstone from somebody that has decades of knowledge and knows what they're doing, so that they don't lead you in the direction of investing in something that's really not going to do anything at all. So hopefully that answers your question. And yes, you can learn more at astrologicalgemstones.com. I have a blog, astrologicalgemblog.com. That's also a great place for people to go, especially somewhere down the learning journey where I really kind of extrapolate on a lot of the common questions and give insight on that.
No, that's very helpful. So I think just to reiterate to people that just going and buying a random gemstone may not be a great idea. You might not actually be getting any benefit from it other than, it aesthetically looking pretty. But even then, if we're talking about energetics, how something's harvested, and I would assume the sustainability around that also affects the stone, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Definitely. Yeah. There's so much different criteria, and working with suppliers that have a respectful relationship with the source mines and the source countries and the families that are mining them, I think is also really important. It's hard to do. I mean, to a certain extent, mining is always extractive.
Right.
Being a human is extractive, but we do our best to mitigate that and work with this as essentially as non-violently as possible. So that is something that we are mindful of as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think that that's important. I just like to kind of iterate to listeners because we are talking about here how to create spaces and things in space to facilitate better health and well-being. And so a big component of that is mindfulness around what you're purchasing and the energy surrounding that. And
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, it's not a perfect world. Like, people have budgets and people, you can't buy everything that's perfectly, karmically set up that you
Everything
would
has got a little bit of blood on it. Everything
yeah,
does.
yeah, exactly. So we're not looking for perfection here, just promoting an idea of mindfulness and understanding and consciousness around what you're purchasing, really.
Yes, perfect, perfectly put.
I know you had spoke to initially at the beginning of the conversation about some gemstones that were harmful. Are there certain gemstones that you just don't subscribe to people in general? Just for,
Yeah,
listeners to know that, like be cautious around, certain stones might, do your research, think about it.
yeah, I think so. I very, very rarely prescribe or recommend gemstones for Rahu and Ketu.
Mm.
So those are also known as the North and South nodes in Western astrology. These are shadow planets. And technically, they're not planets at all. They are mathematical points in space responsible for the eclipse. But they are so powerful that they are given the same regard as the celestial bodies in our solar system because they influence us so much, and they have so much to do with our shadow side. So when we look at them in the astrological chart, they're opposites. They always uh, orbit around the astrological chart or transit it in exact opposition to each other. Rahu is all about attachment, fixation, addiction, obsession, things we can't let go of, unconventionality. And its opposite, Ketu, is all about letting go, surrender, detachment, the mysterious, the unknown, disconnect. Wherever they're transiting heavily, Rahu, we're going to really fixate on those things to the point of suffering. Wherever Ketu is, things are going to be taken away from us suddenly, So there's a lot of grief work around them. I mean, they're fascinating if you're into shadow stuff.
Mhm.
But when it comes to gemstones, I don't often think it's a very good idea to be activating these shadow planets with gems because it can just create more challenging karma in so many cases. If somebody really wants to pursue a path of wealth and fame and material success, Hollywood celebrity style, that's fine. And oftentimes, Rahu is the influence or the planet that will promote things like that. But there is really a shadow side to that path. And in a lot of cases, like they say about people who win the lottery or what have you, sometimes people wind up so much worse and so much farther away from their true selves, and so much more suffering happens when they have these windfalls or these certain types of success that superficially create a bunch of gain. But if it's mismanaged or the shadow self takes over, more suffering happens. So I just exercise so much caution. By default, I never recommend them. K2 stones, I've had instances where somebody's strengthening K2 or detachment has been really helpful to get them out of situations that they were stuck in. But too much detachment also pulls us away from ourselves. It pulls us away from the world around us. That's another really challenging one to navigate. Unless somebody's entire desire is to be like a monk in a cave meditating all day, then that's fine. But yeah, very, very specific medicine that by default I avoid recommending in most cases.
That's interesting. And my thought, I guess my thought is, say if you wanted to work on a house. So say if someone has their south node in their 10th house or their fifth house, but they want to work on their career. Does it impact having K2 in a house that you're looking to amplify affect the gemstone that you're using?
Mhm.
Or do you, yeah, I mean, that's, I guess that's more of the question,
Yeah.
like how you would approach that by
Yeah.
being sensitive to the fact that the south node is there or north node.
Yeah. All right. So let's say somebody has K2 in their 10th house. What they might find is that they excel in careers where there is a spiritual element to it or some sort of unconventional element that allows them to shine with their intuitive ability or something of that nature. They might also find that they really struggle to commit to a particular line of work, or that mysterious events happen all the time that prohibit them from professional success. So, strengthening the ruler of the 10th house to give more concrete support to their focus on career is often a really good way of going about it. It's going to offset K2's influence in that house, maybe causing some disconnect in their ability to stick with a career path that is meaningful for them, or to grow in it, or to be happy and fulfilled in it. If that person, and interestingly enough, a lot of astrologers do this wrong. And they would say, oh, K2 in your 10th house, that's causing disconnect in your career. K2 is such a problem. Let's strengthen it with a K2 gemstone to appease that challenging influence. But gems are not vengeful gods. Like we don't we don't
Right.
have to give them sacrifices. We don't have to wear their gemstones to let them know we're thinking about them. It doesn't quite work that way. But we've seen people try it. And if somebody with this problem wore a K2 gemstone, they would experience further disconnect, further severance, unless they were totally resolute and committed to having a path of action and career in their lives that was deeply committed to spirit and eccentricity and the unconventional and the unseen. And some people do. So maybe like Nikola Tesla or something could have like done great with wearing a cat's eye to strengthen career in unconventional ways. But he also struggled with disconnect with the world around him when he focused on career. He was effectively punished for his brilliance. I don't know where his K2 was, but just saying, so maybe it could further profound eccentric knowledge, but pull somebody away in other ways. And that's again where nothing's really black and white. Often there's mixed results in different ways, but we just want to help people in the simplest and most karmically straightforward way possible.
Okay. I mean, that's my mind is going in the opposite direction. So say like your water houses, your malefic, like, your liberation houses, which, people say are bad karma, but
Like the
you know,
12th house. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. The 12th house, eighth house, and fourth house. So, this is, your water houses, you're potentially, they're considered malefic, but my understanding and my belief is more around that they're liberators. So their goal is really for you to burn through your bad karma, quote, bad karma from previous lives so that you can ultimately be free. And so do you ever have people come to you that are like, bring it? I want, I want to just like, I want to face my karma. I just want to move through this karma. It is, wrecking havoc on my life. I want to face my fears, move through this. Does that ever happen? And is there any recommendation on that side?
Yes. If a planet is ultimately really friendly for us, an auspicious ruler, but it's placed in one of those houses. And I can speak to this personally. I have 5 planets in my 12th house in Scorpio, and that includes Sun, which is a really important planet for me. And I do wear Sun gemstones, even though my Sun is in the 12th house. What that means is that for me, my ultimate path would be to assume authority in some spiritual way, but it's incredibly hard for me. I've had to spend my whole life learning how to not kind of be a doormat. So whenever I would first test out sun gemstones, it does activate the more surface level 12th house karma, increase in expenditure, in expenses, and giving too much and putting too much energy out and dealing with burnout. When I course correct all of that, which the gemstone asks me to do, I find that my dharmic calling is being this really unconventional spiritual authority in a completely niche field, which is super cool. But to this day, I still have imposter syndrome around it. I'm still working through all of that, trying to figure out, where my own sense of inner authority is. But that is what the rubies and the astrological sun gems are trying to do. They're trying to push me in the direction of being confident in my inner authority and my inner spiritual authority. It's so much easier for me to try to support other people doing that than to do it myself. But that's, I'm just being honest with you, that's my current path with that exact example. So, and I am in the bring it on camp. I don't want to spend any more time than I have to running through like these ridiculous patterns that life is way too short for that. So I'm happy to do it. But if you're overly strengthening one of these challenging houses, you just create more complicated karma. And that's where we have to be careful. If it's a really friendly but afflicted planet, it does want to see us overcome this. The bring it on mentality can absolutely work. But if it's a malefic planet or a ruler of these and you just overdo it, it just creates more strain, more discordance. And sure, I mean, maybe trauma makes us all stronger in the long run, but most people don't want to add on more work to the soul work that we're already here to do. And that's where we have to be careful.
Yes, exactly. It kind of reminds me of, it's more of that kind of philosophy where I definitely relate to this, where, that one point in my life, I used to think kind of ego was, I'm better than, but then which it is, but it's also, I'm not good enough, and all of those other, both are there. And
Yes.
the more you sit in either way, you're still producing karma, and to speak to you around gemstones and in the houses or like wherever your karma is.
Mhm.
Like for me, all my planets are basically in the lower part of my chart, like all of them, except for my north node is in I think, 11th house. But I'm basically mostly internal. A lot of my stuff is internal to move through. And as you were talking about Mars, you're like, I have 5 planets in Leo in the second house
Okay.
in Vedic. So I have a ton of Leo. But so I just want to bring it up from that standpoint, because if people are looking to work on their shadows and, to a path of liberation, there's also a way of working with gemstones in that way too, because you can do both. And, why can't it be both? So
Totally. Totally. And maybe one could even say, and I love all these points you're bringing up. Maybe, we do have to look at those things, but not get stuck in them, not identify with them. I do think in some way it's important to feel them, but not feel ashamed about our shadow stuff. But if we, I think bypassing it is also incredibly dangerous. I think the ultimate path of growth is to see it, but then recognize that it is not us. None of it's us, really, but at the same time, like figuring out how to integrate and how to connect and how to unify. Ego is important and self-awareness is important and identity is important. But is our identity bringing us in the direction of connection? Or is it bringing us in the direction of disconnection? I think that's kind of maybe a really good qualifier in terms of where we land with ourselves. And same thing with shadow work and everything. So I think maybe ultimately the goal is to be as connected and integrated as possible. This goes back to talking about truth, being in as much alignment with truth as possible, our own inner truth, being as sovereign as possible. There's so much knowledge out there and so many wonderful guides, but to be able to take what works for us and integrate it, kind of walk away from the rest and not get hung up on the stuff that's out of alignment, just, acknowledge it and walk away from it. I don't know. There's a lot, but yes, the gems are definitely here to help us with all of that. The study of astrology is here to help us with all of that. Even having ultimate spaces, that promote our greatest growth, I think is probably a massive part of that. I totally support that as well. So lots of different tools in the toolbox for sure.
Definitely. So I have a couple of quick questions, like fun questions before you go. So if you were stranded on a desert island, what one gemstone would you bring with you if you had to only choose one?
Whichever one I could eat. Whichever one's going to filter the salt water so I can drink it. Yep, that's an interesting question. Part of me would think, well, I suppose it would be a sun gemstone so that I would do my best to focus on self confidence and inner faith to get myself through very trying times. The sun also represents the self and the highest qualities of the self. And I suppose if we are alone, stranded on a desert island, we'd really hope to be able to get along with ourselves and be integrated with ourselves. So that would probably, other than the gem that will desalinate the water, I think Ruby's going to be my final answer.
So, do you mind sharing your Vedic signs? What is your sun, moon, and rising in Vedic?
Sure. I am a Sagittarius rising, Sagittarius moon, and a Scorpio sun. And Sagittarians are very cool. We're very blunt and straightforward and adventurous and generous and um, driven towards abundance and learning. And I'm very happy with my Sagittarian self, but I'm also the most Scorpio-ish Sagittarius you'll ever meet with 5 planets in Scorpio. Sounds like you're the most probably Leo-y Cancer that's out there in Vedic if you got 5 planets in Leo in the second. Yeah, so that's me. So I'm ruled by Jupiter, and that's why I wear yellow sapphires primarily. That's a gemstone for Jupiter, and I've had really great results related to abundance and wealth and education and learning and all the good things that come from strengthening Jupiter.
I love that. Yeah, you are right. I am a Leo moon, a Cancer rising, and a Virgo sun.
Cool.
So it's always now at this point, I always tell people that when I meet them, I see them in astrological energy. I typically will be like, "Oh, you have this dominant somewhere," because I feel that I feel that energy pretty strong. And it's kind of a great way of, I think, thinking about people and kind of translating energy. So, last question. Do you have like a favorite fact about gemstones? Just kind of like a fun fact that you like to share with people.
I don't know. It's an interesting question. Something that I think about a lot is that precious gems have taken hundreds of millions of years to form within the earth. I think that's something we often take for granted when we're wearing them. But I think it's a fun little random factoid to keep in mind that planet Earth spent unfathomable amounts of time creating this one little tiny gem that we wear, and how much infinite knowledge and data and cosmic light is stored in something that took that long to create. It's almost humbling to me when I think about like how long my yellow sapphire has been sitting around in the earth's crust somewhere relative to my 38-year-old self. It just makes me realize how much wisdom and knowledge there is beyond what I'll probably ever be able to absorb in this lifetime. But I'm grateful to be working with these ancient minerals and their ability to channel light. It's truly miraculous.
I love that. Is kind of, if you feel like you just have a wise soul right on your right, well, part of you now, but
Exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming today. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and I'm probably going to be signing up for a consultation with with you at Astrological Gemstone very soon. And for anyone else, I recommend signing up if you're interested and learn more about your astrology and the gemstones that are best for you.
Awesome.
Great.
Thanks so
Thank
much for having me.
you. That's it for this episode. Please remember before you go to subscribe below. You can also check us out on Instagram at The Aligned Interior or our website, thealignedinterior.com. The Aligned Interior services are also available for hire. So if you have a residential, commercial, or a hospitality project, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at info@thealignedinterior.com. Until next time, be well.